Welcome everyone and good morning. My name is Lisa Vettori. I work at International Women's Development Agency in the partnerships team. And we have a focus in the area on partnerships in Asia and the Pacific. And this morning we are meeting to look at the topic of feminist collective action and how we can resource and support transformative change. Today I'm going to be chairing a panel with a bit of Q&A from the guests, which I will introduce in a moment. But before I do that, I would like to acknowledge that I'm calling in today from the lands of the Jaja Jurong people from the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the Aboriginal elders of other communities. So on the panel today, we have three members that IWDA has worked with in different ways. Putheavy Oil from United Sisterhood Alliance in Cambodia. United Sisterhood Alliance is a group of 4 women's rights organisations mobilising grassroots workers in Cambodia to advocate for social justice, and has a focus on collective action of women garment workers and women sex workers. Doris Bartel is an independent feminist researcher and evaluator focused on working with grassroots groups on social change and movements. Doris is calling in from Washington, DC, and last year Doris led an evaluation of one of IWDA's 5-year programs focused on movements and social change. And finally, we have a second Doris, Doris Talefu from Brown Girl Work in Samoa. It's an organisation that joined Feminist Pacific Coalition working on gender equality called We Rise this year. So I'd like to invite anyone to post their name in the chat, the organisation that they're from and maybe the location you're calling from. As I said, we're going to do some Q&A, and just wanted to start by saying that IWDA is hosting this session today because as an organisation, we recognise how vital it is to support collective action in order to see transformative change. And it's a key part of our strategic plan. Particularly over the last 5 years, we've really focused on working with movements and social change partners. So before we start, I would like to just do a bit of a poll here today to get a sense of what's brought you to the session today. So I'm going to ask our tech facilitator, Adam, if he can please share the poll in the chat screen, which is looking at your background and interest in feminist collective action. Thanks, Adam. So if you've voted, Adam, maybe because you're the controller, I think 10 out of 19 respondents have voted. So I think that's probably a good enough sample. Would you like to share the results now, Adam? Okay, so quite a bit of a mix there, but coming up as it's a new area for people and keen to learn or show how they can use it a little bit more. So that's interesting for us to know in terms of our feedback in the questions. So I'm actually going to now, to start us off for this session, we thought it would be good to show a little video that talks to the work of United Sisterhood in Cambodia. So I'm going to pass over to Putheavy to introduce the video, and then I'm going to share the video. So Putheavy, if you can just introduce the video that we're going to look at. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Putheavy from Cambodia. It's nice to be here. So the video is one part of our joint women's rights campaign to demand for the basic social services, where we are working with sex worker and garment worker in Cambodia to demand for the issue of room rental, issue of hair services, and issues of right to work. So I think let's see the video first, and then I will share you more about how we work with the women worker in those sectors in Cambodia. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, I'll just share the screen and share sound.
ខ្ញុំកំពុងតែរស់នៅក្នុងបន្ទប់ជួលមួយនៅទីក្រុងភ្នំពេញខ្ញុំឈ្មោះរនហើយជារៀងរាល់ល្ងាចខ្ញុំតែងខ្លួនយ៉ាងស្រស់ស្អាតដើម្បីទៅធ្វើការនៅពេលយប់ខ្ញុំសង្ឃឹមថានឹងរកលុយបានច្រើននៅក្នុងយប់នេះខ្ញុំមិនមានកន្លែងធ្វើការជាក់លាក់ទេធម្មតាខ្ញុំទៅរកលុយនៅតាមសួននិងកន្លែងដទៃទៀតដែលអាចរកភ្ញៀវបានពេលខ្លះខ្ញុំមានអារម្មណ៍ថាភ័យខ្លាចពីព្រោះតែងតែមានប៉ូលីសដើរតាមសួនហើយអាចចាប់ខ្ញុំនិងប្រាំងអំពើហិង្សាមកលើខ្ញុំទៀតជួនកាលគាត់ជេរពេលខ្លះវាយហើយពេលខ្លះទៀតយកដំបងមកឆក់ខ្ញុំដោយតែខ្ញុំបានគិតមិនខុសមែនភ្លាមនោះប៉ូលីសក៏បានមកចាប់ខ្ញុំមែនពេលខ្ញុំកំពុងតែអង្គុយចាំភ្ញៀវតែខ្ញុំគិតមិនទៅមិនដឹងជាគេយកខ្ញុំទៅណាទេតែខ្ញុំខកអីក្រោយមកទើបខ្ញុំដឹងថាប៉ូលីសយកខ្ញុំទៅមណ្ឌលសម្ចាត់សង្គមកិច្ចខ្ញុំត្រូវជាប់ឃុំនៅទីនោះដោយមិនដឹងមូលហេតុច្បាស់លាស់តែខ្ញុំត្រូវជាប់បែបនេះដល់ពេលណាខ្ញុំបារម្ភខ្លាំងណាស់ណាគ្រួសារបានណាមើលថែជាពិសេសកូនតូចនៅផ្ទះឯខ្ញុំក៏មានជំងឺប្រចាំកាយតើបានថ្នាំមកពីណាមកលេបនៅមានទៀតថ្លៃបន្ទប់ជាថ្ងៃបើមិនបានបង់ពេលមួយថ្ងៃម្ចាស់ផ្ទះប្រកាសជារើអីវ៉ាន់របស់ខ្ញុំបោះចោលអស់ហើយ
ខ្ញុំឈ្មោះស្រីម៉ៅមកពីខេត្តតាកែវរាល់ថ្ងៃខ្ញុំស្នាក់នៅបន្ទប់ជួលតូចមួយក្នុងទីក្រុងភ្នំពេញរាល់ព្រឹកខ្ញុំចាប់ផ្ដើមធ្វើការនៅម៉ោង 7ធម្មតាខ្ញុំចេញពីធ្វើការនៅម៉ោង 4តែខ្ញុំត្រូវធ្វើការថែមម៉ោងពី 2 ទៅ 4 ម៉ោងក្នុងមួយថ្ងៃពេលខ្លះអាចថែមម៉ោងលើសហ្នឹងពេលចេញពីរោងចក្រពេលយប់ផ្លូវទៅបន្ទប់ជួលរបស់ខ្ញុំងងឹតឈឹងខ្ញុំពិតជាខ្លាចខ្លាំងណាស់បើសិនជាមានភ្លើងតាមផ្លូវប្រហែលជាខ្ញុំមិនមានការភ័យខ្លាចបែបហ្នឹងទេសួស្តីបងខ្ញុំដូចប្រហែលមកបងឯងបងម៉ៅមែនយើងធ្លាប់ជួបគ្នានៅវេទិកាសហគមន៍ចាខ្ញុំហ្នឹងហើយនឹងឈ្មោះរតហ្នឹងកាលហ្នឹងយើងធ្លាប់បានជជែកគ្នាពីបញ្ហាជាច្រើនចាឥឡូវហ្នឹងមិនដែរបញ្ហាបងបងបញ្ហារបស់ពួកខ្ញុំមានច្រើនណាប៉ុន្តែអាបញ្ហាដែលចម្បងសម្រាប់ពួកខ្ញុំហ្នឹងគឺរឿងផ្ទះជួលទឹកភ្លើងហ្នឹងពួកខ្ញុំត្រូវរកលុយបង់ជាថ្ងៃឲ្យគេបើមិនបានបង់ឲ្យគេទេគេដេញចេញភ្លាមហើយបញ្ហាយើងមិនខុសគ្នាទេទោះខ្ញុំបង់ថ្លៃបន្ទប់ជាខែក៏នៅតែខ្ញុំខំប្រឹងរកលុយដើម្បីបង់ថ្លៃបន្ទប់ជួលដូចតែគ្នានឹងពេលខ្លះខ្ញុំប្រឹងធ្វើការថែមម៉ោងខ្លាំងពេករហូតដល់ធ្លាក់ខ្លួនឈឺពេលឈឺម្ដងត្រូវចំណាយលុយច្រើនត្រូវខ្ចីលុយគេដើម្បីយកមកព្យាបាលខ្លួនទៀតតែយើងគួរធ្វើមិនទៅ
មិនដឹងថាសិទ្ធិរបស់ពួកយើងរាល់ថ្ងៃនៅឯណាទេ
យើងគួរតែយករឿងនេះទៅជជែកនៅក្នុងសហគមន៍របស់យើងក្រែងនោះមានគំនិតអីថ្មី
មែនហើយយើងត្រូវនាំគ្នាគិតដើម្បីស្វែងរកដំណោះស្រាយរួមគ្នា
ហើយយើងក៏ត្រូវតែមើលអំពីច្បាប់និងគោលនយោបាយដែលពាក់ព័ន្ធអំពីបញ្ហាទាំងនេះ
ខ្ញុំជាអ្នករកស៊ីផ្លូវភេទ
ខ្ញុំជាកម្មការិនីរោងចក្រតើខ្ញុំជាជនចំណាក់ស្រុកមែនឬទេ
តើខ្ញុំជាស្ត្រីមែនឬទេ
តើខ្ញុំគួរទទួលបានសេវាសង្គមជាមូលដ្ឋានដែរឬទេតើខ្ញុំមានសិទ្ធិទទួលបានសេវាទាំងនោះដែរឬទេ
តើខ្ញុំគួរទទួលបានការការពារសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពពីរដ្ឋាភិបាលនិងអង្គការក្រៅរដ្ឋាភិបាលដែរឬទេ
តើខ្ញុំគួរទទួលបានយុត្តិធម៌សង្គមដែរឬទេ
Thanks for sharing that video, Putheavy. I'd like to direct the first question to you. The video ends with the word answer. So can you tell us a little bit more about how United Sisterhood mobilises workers to organise themselves and what actual methods do you use to try and support collective action?
Thanks, Lisa. So let me briefly share what is United Sisterhood Alliance. So we are having 4 sister organizations working together, and we will share the same root from our same mother, Women Agenda for Change. And we come together as the alliance to support each other in terms of resource mobilization, supporting collective action, to do the support the grassroots community, especially the women worker, sex worker, and garment worker. So from the video is one of experience and also one of our method in terms of how we organize and mobilize women worker in Cambodia. So we continue to build the women and people power through the ongoing community organizing. Particularly, we have creating the ensuring they have the safe space, either in the working area or the room rental area, to share, to connect, to discuss, and to support each other and identify what are their common struggles. And you see that organized sex worker or garment worker is defined different way, but we try to identify what are the common things that we are the women have facing or struggling in our life, especially living in the city in terms of working and living. So our core method or strategy is ensuring that everyone from the women worker, from the farmer, artists and youth, and also our staff team are active involving and share responsible in terms of building the power of the program design, lead and take action, and how we share our analysis to ensure that the issue, what are the root cause, how the system impact from their life. So we also using artists in terms of music and other form of cultural performance to mobilize not only to the women worker but also to other people to come together to understand and to join the movement together. So yeah, that's some sort of our how we organize and mobilize the worker. Yeah, thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Putheavy. We've got a few questions coming up in the chat, but what I'm going to do is just hold those questions for the moment and go through to our first questions that we had set up with the panel, and then we'll come to those Q&A ones. I'd like to ask a question now to Doris from Brown Girl Work. Brown Girl Work is an organisation in Samoa that has recently joined a feminist a coalition of other organisations in the Pacific. So I guess our question to you as an organisation that's coming into a collective action coalition, can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to join a coalition and what you're hoping to get out of being part of a group of organisations working on different issues?
Thank you, Lisa. Hello, everyone. My name is Malucel Doris Tulipao. First, you know, we're the only youth feminist group in Samoa. And since there's no stigma to the feminist label yet, we've been doing amazing work as a feminist organization. We're saying that because it's a new term in Samoa, we don't have any mentors to go to, or I don't have anyone in the Pacific that I can ask questions on doing this work. And the amazing part of being in a feminist Pacific coalition is that it's people that look like me, it's people that's in the Pacific that have been doing work for 30 years, and that I don't need to reinvent the wheel and learn more. And I think that's the biggest part for me as a young NGO, where we've been doing a lot of groundwork, grassroots work on domestic violence, sexual abuse, after school programs. That's the biggest thing that Brown Girl Work does. We train our youth to go into the schools to make safe spaces, but what's next on the feminist movement? And I sometimes forget because I don't have people telling me that are like the We Rise Coalition that have been doing work in the feminist movement, that don't forget your path and what you're supposed to be doing, and always promoting feminism. Because for me, as a feminist, I sometimes forget because we don't have any other feminist groups in Samoa to always identify as that. We also have a lot of boys in our group, and they love being feminists as well. And that's probably the best thing, that there is no stigma to the word yet. I think, again, like I said, with having We Rise Coalition, with a group of women that have been in the feminist movement for years, decades, giving me hope that one day my organization will be as great as theirs, will change policies, laws that they have done in their own countries in the Pacific that I need to look at as well. So I think I've been, it's been a few months being in the coalition, and before I was telling people that, you know, we've been doing all this youth and groundwork. Now we need to start mobilizing. How do we change policies, and asking the other groups in the Pacific what they've been doing and how can we learn from that? And, you know, the doors that they have opened for us has been amazing.
Thank you. Thanks, Doris. It's great to hear about that, that passion that you showed around joining a coalition. We've got a few questions coming in the chat. I've just got two more set questions to our panel, and then we'll pass over to those ones. But this question is something that we wanted to ask Putheavy again about United Sisterhood Alliance. It's an alliance or a coalition of organisations that has operated for quite a long time, has a lot of experience, not only working in Cambodia, but, you know, collectively organising with other actors in Southeast Asia. So I'm interested, Putheavy, how do you organise a collective agenda when you've got 4 different groups in your alliance? How do you kind of manage those tensions and come together on a collective agenda? If you could speak to that, please.
Yeah, actually, we working with a different group, and we acknowledge the diversity of not only in our team group but to our community. And it takes a lot of time to how we ensure building trust with the community and the team to share the same perspective and analysis, and also our political agenda. So in terms how we are able to do the collective action. So first thing is to make sure that we understand the same thing about our problem, For example, that our women body, our labor, our participation as women have been exploited or abused by the system of patriarchy, the system of capitalism. So first thing in the organizing is very important to organize different consultation, meeting, discussion to ensure that everyone are in the same page. And then it's come up with a analysis who are involved, what is through the power mapping, who are involved in this issue. For example, like issue of health issue. So it's not only about how we are able to access to the health services, but the question why the health services have been privatized and we had to pay a big amount of money. So we identify who involved in the situation that we face, and then we collect the story. And the story itself is not only from the research or study, but the story from the feel, the song, the performance that people are able to use it to talk and to share. And usually we often organize different platform, either in the ground, national or international partner. But we try to select the platform that are able to bring the message, and the platform that community voice are recognize the issue. So we're using both hard and soft approach so far. In the last 10 years, we are able to walk on the street to do the demonstration or protest. But later on, because of the court situation, we move to the using soft approach, but we still firm our political position by using art or performance. But our demand and our message are still the same. But we try to find different way to ensure that the issue is still heard and still recognized. And the last thing is about we share our risk analysis together with our team and our community to ensure that everyone holding the same plate. So is everyone responsible? If any risk happens, so we know exactly what to do and how we deal with the risk that we are doing for our work. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Putheavy. Before we move on to the chats, I'm going to just pass to Doris in Washington, who is a social researcher. We worked with Doris, IWDA worked with Doris last year on an evaluation looking at movements and collective action. So Doris, based on your work, you've worked in this area for several decades with a particular focus on collective action. What do you see as some of the relevant points to the development sector? What would you recommend to the development sector of why collective action is important for change?
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, I've worked in international development for a couple of decades now, and much of that work has been focused in the health sector, but also specifically on issues of gender-based violence and gender discrimination. And I've seen a lot of idea trends in international development come and go, from large-scale programs, very top-down, to green revolution, to small-scale, community-based and participatory approaches that focus on local solutions. But my question is, as an evaluator, what actually works to overcome poverty? And my orientation for the evaluation of success in international development programs comes from studying the work of Paulo Freire. He was an educator from Brazil who believed in turning the classroom dynamics upside down. His approach was not to give intellectual knowledge to students, but to help his students, who were poor street children, analyze the system of oppression in their own context that was keeping them from using their own power to make the changes that they themselves needed. So this is a key point for this presentation and for this audience. Poverty is not just an economic issue. It's a social power issue. You saw this clearly in the video that Putheavy shared. Unfortunately, even in international development, many of the systems that we work in actually keep the economic and social status quo intact. We have to find, as international development actors, different solutions that directly address power in order to achieve success. And from my experience and from the research, I would say it shows pretty clearly that the only way to change that status quo of power is to use tools for analyzing power and using collective power, as Putheavy and Doris have described here. And the approaches of collective action and movement strengthening you heard from these examples are some outstanding examples of how grassroots groups all over the world are addressing fundamental issues of power through collective action and social movements. They're using tools of power to turn development upside down, actually. And their success relies on building up a constituent base of women who analyze and understand patriarchal systems of injustice and work to uproot those systems. Development actors interested in overcoming poverty and the success that entails also need to better understand and use these tools of collective power by grassroots groups in their own context. But learning how to do so will require some humility and some good listening skills by we as development actors who are used to doing things in a certain way. Based on our work with IWDA and United Sisterhood and other agencies, we've articulated some of the key recommendations for development implementers and donors, and we'll share those towards the end of this session. Thanks.
Thanks, Doris. I'm going to now have a look at the questions and answers, and I can see that there are a few questions around involving men in transformative processes and engaging men in feminist movements. So perhaps I might just pass over to Doris at Brown Girl Work and Putheavy, if you, from your experience working on the ground in your local context, how you go about engaging men. And Doris, you've turned your camera on, so I'll pass over to you first.
Okay, so like I said before, with the feminist movement in Samoa, there's no stigma to the word, but I think understanding that men don't know, a lot of young men in my programs, when they came into Brown Girl Woke, they didn't have the idea that they were sexist, or they didn't realize, because they grew up, I mean, they were raised a certain way. Until we give that education and that information, that's how we start the transformative action with men, is making these spaces to feel safe for them as well. I understand, being in Samoa for the last 4 years, a lot of the work is ending violence against women. A lot of the words are always, we're always textualizing towards women, but men are also the abusers. Men are also a part of the problem. So we need to make sure that with the feminist work, that we make it feel safe for them as well to come in and learn more about what is feminism and the transformative process.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see how we engage man or boy in the feminist. Actually, feminist is for everyone when we are challenging the power relationship. So it's beyond men or women, right? So everyone can be a feminist. So it a lot of reflection that a lot of questions also come up to United Sisterhood Alliance, why your team is occupy only women and your community also women. And we also respond that because men is already everywhere. So we just try to occupy the space that available for us to talk our issues, talk about our reproductive health, talk about our sexuality, talk about our labor issues. So we as the women, we only have a small space. That's why we try to organize ourselves to challenge the power relation, not to challenge the man as the person, but to challenge the power relation. But coming back, how we engage a man or boy in our process. So we do the same. We question that being a male or a woman, that you are a garment worker. So what are the experience of exploitation that you face in your working area, in your living area? So we asking the same question, but also we question another question. What the privilege you have as the male compared to your female partner or female friend working in the factory. At least you are able to walk at the street at night after you work overtime freely than women. So that's why we need to be very much focused on women, because the oppressed has been put to women a lot. So as being male, you need to be more active and need to be more understanding why our focus is much more to women than men. So that's somehow experience that I and Tim has been working so far in terms how we engage men or female in the way that we working toward change. Yeah.
Thanks, Putheavy. I'm just looking through the questions here, and I think there's an interesting question around from Jesslyn, who asks, how do we support and transform women who suffer gender inequality issues in remote parts of the world? So when collaboration in more remote and hard to reach areas, I think is the key part of the question there. If you want to answer the question, I'll put on your camera. Otherwise, I'll put to perhaps Doris in Washington, just from your experience in working in different locations as an evaluator, and then we'll go to either Putheavy or Doris at Roundtable Work.
Yeah, that's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. Reaching people who are in remote rural areas is a little bit harder for sure. But I think probably both of our panelists, Putheavy and Doris, will be able to talk about how they also do that, because that you will always find people who are organizing, even in rural areas. The outreach, you know, to people who are living in remote and rural areas is actually going pretty strong based on our evaluation that we did together with IWDA and partners. They're doing amazing work by living and working in those areas. I take my hat off to people who are doing it, because it's hard work and it takes a lot of energy to do that. I'll turn it over to Putheavy and Doris in case they want to add anything.
Thank Dora. I would give one example how we reach out to community. Is one of our group messenger band. We use the song, but the song is a political song, not general song. The song that we collect the story from people from the field, either sex worker, garment worker, farmer, or landless. So the group often reach out to the people at the both rural and urban community to collect the story. So they are able to connect themselves to share the story, and the MP, the messenger band, use that to compose the song, and they try to use their song to reach out to community to engage with the discussion. So yes, but I think now in terms of the COVID-19, not only in the rural area, but even in the urban area, we are becoming quite difficult in terms of this connect to people or organize the people, because of the restriction or the how we can talk or meet each other in public space. Yeah, thank you.
You're on mute there, Doris. Just go on off mute.
I agree with Doris as well. I only work in the rural areas and in the remote islands, and they actually still have a structure of a government, like, because we go by the chief system. So all we have to do is try to, call the chief and go out to the rural areas. But because they haven't been touched by, globalization and the westernized world, they're actually doing well. Even with COVID-19 and with a lot of shipment and food not coming into the country, we were scared that the rural areas where they don't make that much money would be harmed more. But when we went to the rural areas, they were okay. They were living off the plantation, which were in more town area. We weren't okay because we've been living off, westernized food. So I think, again, when we do gender-based violence projects, it's easier for us because they still have women committees. A lot of them don't work. They stay in the village. So they have more time to learn about gender-based violence and try to have, and again, just to have time. It's usually harder for us to do anything in town, but when we go into the rural areas, the women committees are so happy to have people visit and give information that they want to share with other villages. So it's been great in the rural areas where they don't have the same issues that it would be for a person that lives in the city, where they might have to work or they have all these other obligations.
Thanks, Doris, for those examples. I'm now going to pass over to a question that's come from Jeremiah 10 around how is constitutional power base organised? So I'll just read that one again. It's about, I guess, how is the constitutional power base organised in alliances or coalitions? I think that probably the question was typed at the time that Putheavy was talking about United Sisterhood Alliance. So perhaps you could talk first, Putheavy, around how the alliance has a constitution, and then Doris, if you could speak to your experience so far entering the We Rise coalition and how the power is organised within that coalition.
Yeah, so we'll share more how the alliance has been exist. So like I'm sharing before that previously the four organizations were small. We are small organization and we are grassroots organization. So when it's come up to the resource mobilization, it's very challenging because at the time, I think almost 10 years back, most of donors don't believe that we can do it. Our capacity in the grant management, financial reporting is, we are still in the low position. That's why the sister have come up together to form as the alliance, that to be the power of the four organizations to coming together to have power, so we are able to prove to the partner that we have capacity to manage the fund, and we have the clear political agenda in terms of resourcing, and be selecting the fund that is okay for us, it's not exploited to our community and our natural resources. So we come up with the platform that the alliance is doing the coordination on funding, communication with the partner, reporting. So the rest of our the four sisters are having much time to engage with the community, do their activism on the ground. So let the technical people deal with the donor. So they manage their full engagement with community. So that's some kind of story that we come together as the alliance. So maybe I could share more about how we organize, the women worker or sex worker. As I shared before, that it takes a lot of time since I think since early 2000. in the case of sex worker, because at that time, the brothel was closed by the ordering from the government. So sex workers had no workplace to do, so they had to stand at a public park, public space to earn, to looking for their client for their sex services. And in 1998, there was a law on anti-trafficking, where the laws have been a lot of abuse arrested to sex workers because the government found that we are doing the job, dirty job that's not give dignity to society. So a lot of abuse of violence had been made to the sex worker and a lot of struggle. So sex workers are coming together and question what did we do wrong. Like the video said, we just do our services, selling our sex services. What's wrong with us that we do our job? And that's come up with a lot of power that people try to question to the government about the way we work, and we need to be recognized as the citizen, as the women, and our entitled to the services has been need to be recognized and respected. So this is some kind of example that we have been experienced so far, and I'd love to share more if we have time. Thank you.
I think it's been amazing having IWDA be the donor to We Rise, because they've been making sure that our voices are heard in the We Rise Coalition for the Pacific. It's Samoa, Fiji, Vanuatu, Solomons, PNG, and Tonga. So making sure that all of us are represented, making sure that we feel that we're being heard. So it's been amazing because I would have thought it would be different I've been working with other groups of donors, like with the UN or anybody else, where they have to check so many boxes. But with IWDA, all our concerns are always heard, and they make sure that they're not telling us what needs to be done in our own countries where we're at, that we actually tell them what is needed and how we can make sure that this coalition is stronger. So with the power dynamics, it's been amazing to me. Again, I never had mentors for the feminist movement that was Pacific Islander women. So being in the We Rise Coalition and telling, like, not saying we're telling IWDA what we want, but it's been great for me to know how to speak up, and that we need to say what's needed in our country instead of just nodding our head just because we're trying to get funding. And that's how power dynamics, we lose that. So it's been amazing work so far.
Thanks, Doris. It was like a nice plug there to the IWDA work, and no intention there. I think it leads quite nicely to a question that is posted here by Colin, which is around how foreign NGOs and local agencies can negotiate joint power ventures. So a bit more about how does a foreign NGO engage when there is no obvious agencies to collaborate with. So yeah, I think, it's an interesting question around the role of foreign NGOs working in local spaces. And perhaps who would like to pass to that one first? Doris, would you like to, Doris in Washington, do you want to start, being somebody who's worked in a lot of international NGOs, what do you think the role of international NGOs is in working in this space?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think international NGOs really need to pay close attention to who's operating on the ground and really listen hard. Listening skills are really important. I think there's a lot more that can be done of partnering with and supporting the actors who are already on the ground. As Doris mentioned about, there's often a strong feminist movement in most countries, actually, and they have a lot of experience and expertise and are leading the way. So, for international NGOs and for even some donors, I think there's a lot of listening that needs to be done, and supporting and learning how to be a good supportive ally in that space. We have some really specific examples of what that looks like, which we're going to get to in the last recommendation slides. So I'll turn this back over to Putheavy and Doris if they want to add anything.
Maybe just a few points adding to Dora about how the donor could engage more. So they need to spend time with the people, listen to the people, and need to understand the situation around all the issues that happen. And one important thing is about when you really want to support the grassroots community on the movement building. So you have to be ensure that you understand the process and the chain, not the chain that you want as the outcome or goal that's set in the project proposal, but you have to understand what are the change during the process of change. And yeah, flexible funding to support the movement is very important. And the funding should not come from the project base, but need to be come from what people really want to do. Thank you.
Doris, did you want to add anything more onto that point?
I think just the same thing, just listening to us and understanding our, just like what Putheavy said, that the process of change, like sometimes what's asked of us is sometimes feels so far away, because like small organizations like mine, there's only 4 of us. So yeah, just listening to us that are on the ground. I know it's COVID-19, people can't go to other countries right now. It would be nice if the donors, if they were international, would come and see what we had to go through. Sometimes they don't know that we don't have transportation or we don't have certain things. So I think it's on both sides that we have to make sure that, you know, the international donor understands and shows them what's happening. And then they have to do the same thing, again, like what Doris Putheavy said, just to listen. Thank you.
Okay, I think just looking at the time, I've probably got time for a few more questions. I'm going to now look at the question around cultural norms. So it's a question from Annie, and the question is, are cultural norms a barrier in your organisation or maybe in your organising work? So can I pass to you first, Putheavy, around addressing cultural norms and being organised?
Yes, of course, because not only in the organization, but in our society. For example, like when we working with sex worker, because sex worker are already named in the bad position in the second class, right? So when we work with them, the thing that we had to keep reminding and keep informing or keep alerting to everyone that what is our goal to come together as the women. So we challenge each other, of course, we open to challenge, but we had to remind ourselves that why we come as the alliance, what is our political goal and what is our dream as the women. So I think it takes time to build people to understand, especially when we have a new people coming to the organization. So the working environment is very important to build our identity that we are diversity and we respect the different perspective of the people. And it needs to be like the culture of the organization to engage and to listen and to respect to the people's choice. Yeah.
Doris, would you, Doris and Samoa, would you like to add anything around overcoming some of the cultural norms when you're trying to do work on the ground?
Yes, and Samoa is a very patriarch country in every level. So, and especially being a feminist group run by women, young women, and being youth, we're always culturally not supposed to be speaking. So I think for us, what we've done is to make sure that we do work with other groups that are intergenerational. For myself, I became a chief. I think you have to find, choose your battles and find ways to make sure that we can do this work without having those cultural norms barriers for us. So I think that's the biggest step for myself, was to find ways where I'm not slamming more doors in my face, but that one of us, if we're doing this work, we have to take the sacrifice and understand that you're going against cultural norms that it's like 100 years. What can we do to just earn that respect, open the door for the next generation so they don't have to go through the same thing? So that's what we have done so far.
Thanks, Doris. I think there's a few questions there that were already answered, so I'm just going to go to the final one I can see, which is from Arita, who asks, how can women collaborate and connect effectively for change or transformation? So perhaps, maybe this is around effective collaboration and what it takes to be effective in your connections. So Putheavy, perhaps you could start with how you work on the ground with those grassroots constituency and how you really get them to collaborate and connect.
I think it's built on the previous discussion about how we organize and mobilize women. So the space, do we have a safe space and enough space for women to talk about the issue? It needs to be built from their personal issue and coming to the political issue, right? So space is important to discuss and find out. And the second thing is, do we understand this thing the same page? So it needs to be the analysis should become the issues like why we work with the sex worker, what are the patriarchal, the male domination have been affected to us, and how we as the women deal with it. So yeah, space and the way we see the thing from the same eye, and also sharing our ownership, sharing our responsible when we are okay to do something together. So these are all the area that we have been doing so far. So of course, women network or women organization often have different perspective, but at least we try to find what are the common things that we as the women face in our society. Yeah, thank you.
We've got 5 minutes left, so I think perhaps I might just wrap up, and we've got a final slide around recommendations. I'd like to thank everyone for their really interesting questions today around some of the more nuts and bolts of organising and how do you engage people on the ground, as well as some of the questions around the role of international organisations in working with movements. IWDA tried to bring this panel together to have people from the ground, as well as, I guess, evaluators who have worked in the sector, to see the role of movements from different angles. So thank you everyone for joining today. I'm going to leave you with today some recommendations that came out of our evaluation last year. We did a big evaluation of a 5-year program, which Doris helped us with, Doris in Washington. So I'm going to share those recommendations as our final slide. And Doris, if you can just speak to those just for a few minutes, and we'll be closing off at 5:45 on the hour. So I'll just share those, and while you put your camera on.
Oh, great. So I think you have to share your screen so we can see the slide. Yes, so as part of the 5-year evaluation, we put together some recommendations for how to support collective action and movement building. And this is based on ideas, suggestions, and recommendations from the partners working in that program, as well as based on some good practices from some other feminist donor environments. So we've narrowed it down to these 6, which I'll talk through just a little bit. So these are recommendations both for donors and for folks working in international development as implementers or in other roles. So for donors, in the first place, please consider shifting to participatory grant-making models that incorporate some shared decision-making about funding with grantee partners. There are some great resources on how to do that well, and we can share some of those if you're interested. For donors and for international NGOs, please use shared governance models with your partners with shared decision-making. Doris talked a little bit about this, and Putheavy did as well. For donors, Putheavy mentioned this, flexible long-term core funding is key for the work of grassroots groups who are building constituency power and collective action. And this is in contrast to a lot of development funds, which are activity-based funding models. I can't emphasize this next one enough. Donors and implementing partners in the development sector need to invest in grassroots groups that are doing the hard work of building consciousness, leadership capacity, and tools of collective action by their community constituents. For development professionals who believe that they always know best, please recognize and celebrate the in-house capacity that local groups already have. And to best support working on power issues, include groups working to address gender discrimination and violence. Please find ways to ensure the safety and well-being of staff. This includes incorporating budget line items for self-care and wellness. Thanks so much, everybody. It's been a pleasure to be part of this panel.
So that's the end of our session today. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining. And thank you very much to the panel, Doris in Washington, Doris from Brown Girl Work, and Putheavy from United Sisterhood Alliance. And thank you, everyone, for your questions. I've posted in the chat a few resources that you might want to have a look at. The Messenger Band Facebook page that United Sisterhood, one of the members of United Sisterhood, as well as IWDA's new movement strengthening framework, which you might take a look at. Thanks very much.